Okay. Thank you, everyone, to come into this session to supercharging your DevOps Center pipelines. While we are speaking a lot about DevOps Center today, a lot of what we say works for other DevOps tools as well. How many of you came to Adrian's session earlier on DevOps Center? Okay. And how many of you have used DevOps Center before? And how many of you like it? Oh, there are some. That's good. Hopefully, we can change your opinion today. So Adrian actually used this slide earlier as well. So this is what Salesforce set out to do with DevOps Center. A lot of the negative feedback I've seen is because developers were first to embrace it, but it was never aimed at developers first. We are getting there, but it was aimed at admins. It was about everyone in the team using the same tool to develop. How many of you are experts in Git, other than Keir? Okay. But all of us do deployments, and some of us have been asked, I'm technical, but I hate using Git. I'm terrible at remembering commands in the right order and which one I do first. And if you get it wrong with Git, it can go badly wrong, and then you need expert help. So let's look at what a standard best practice pipeline might look like. So on the left-hand side, we've got some kind of requirement. That could be an Elements Cloud user story, it could be Capado, it could be Jira, Azure DevOps, however you track your items. And from that, you have a number of tasks. And the best practice is when you have one of those tasks, you have a work item of something you want to change. And for each of those changes, we have feature branches. So each feature branch goes with each change. Quite hard to be disciplined sometimes, I know, but that's best practice. When we want to move that change, and we may have multiple dev sandboxes or scratch orgs, now that can be one per epic, it could be one per developer. There are different ways and best practice around that, especially with DevOps. You need to learn the Git commands to pull and push information from that scratch org and push it into your version control repository. But once you've done that change, and when you follow this process, you've done your develop, unit test. Even if it's a declarative change, you still need to unit test it. You just may not have a result to show. You commit it, you review it. This is a Salesforce slide, and they're talking about testing, which is great news for me because I work for Provar. But how many of you actually do any testing then that's automated? How many of you just run unit tests? I've seen far too many companies that think this is just rerun the unit tests. Yes, you can use Postman. Yes, you can use Provar. Yes, there are other tools you can use. Whatever tools you are using, you want to test different things at different stages. So we'll look at more of this later when Samuel presents. But if I'm at this end, I want to do a code scan. I don't want to run functional testing. I don't want to run my whole regression pack here. I want to actually know, is this good enough quality before I promote it through my pipeline? But as we move through the pipeline, we have different environments. Integration environment, staging environment, and each time our branches are being merged in to our single truth, which is great. However, that is hard for admins, and a lot of admins I know have really struggled and actually been off with stress because they've been told this is the way you must now work. It's not so clever. So what Salesforce have done, as it stands today, unless things change in the last 24 hours, DevOps Center still remains more suited to admins, and there's a reason for that. But what we're trying to do is get people off change sets, following a source code development process, and having a hybrid team where whether you're an admin, Cloudy up here, or whether you're a developer, Cody down there, you're actually interacting at the same time with an org or with a Git repo. Yes, you're pressing some different buttons, there's some certain different actions you're using, but actually you can have people working with the CLI and people working with DevOps Center to have a single truth for your org. That's the intention. Now, the issue with the development side was there was a new SF command, SF deploy, or an adaptation to it, which allowed DevOps Center to track what was happening. And what happened was GitHub, which is currently the only supported version control system, but there are more coming, the events it fires are the things this is listening to. What happened here? Oh, I can see that. Oh, that's been deployed. That's been merged. What happened was that event that GitHub fires can take 1 minute, it can take 4 hours. And we saw that at Trailblazer DX. It happened during a live demo. It was like, it's not working. And then he spoke to GitHub and said, yeah, it could take 24 hours. So they're redesigning their event model. I don't know why they didn't use their own PubSub API, but they're redesigning the event model, which is good because then it will probably work with Bitbucket and GitLab and all the other tools as well. But I guess it was a time to market decision. So, of course, a developer can choose to use DevOps Center to do their deployments. You can. I'm not sure why most developers would. If you understand the CLI and you use the CLI, you probably don't need to do that. One caution I have is if you're here or here, try not to keep switching between these because you will run into trouble in my experience. So the process is similar. And by the way, if any of you still using the dev console for writing your code, Todd, crawl out of the room now. Okay. No, there's no one there, don't worry. As we'll see shortly, when we pick up a work item and we want to interact with this, it needs to be as easy as possible, as easier user experience. So we're going to look into that. So here's DevOps Center. Here's a pipeline. You can see we have work items here where we can add work items. We'll do a video demo in a second. You can see that. We set our environment up. We tell it where our GitHub org is. And we tell it all our sandboxes or Scratch orgs. That's great. And we have all our work items of things we want to move through our pipeline. It's a very visual display, very easy to understand, I hope. But this process you define, this is not fixed. You don't have to have all these stages. In theory, you can have the dev and production only. Don't do that, okay? If you do that, you're never going to roll something back, okay? Always have at least 3 environments in my experience. There's also a choice on these individual work items can be promoted. So get a ticket, we want to be agile, we want to release changes to the business as quickly as possible. But there is a time in your process you want to define when you set this up. Say, in this environment, we're going to bundle, we're going to create a release candidate, okay? But you get to define where that happens. Now, here's an interesting trade-off. If I keep things broken down, it's much easier for me to decide not to deploy something and take it out the pipeline. But the longer something stays as an individual work item with the associated metadata, the more chance I'm going to have a conflict. The more chance that 2 people are making changes to the same object and something might get overwritten. When we bundle, we have a single source of the truth. We have a single copy of the account page layout or a single copy of the permissions on a profile. Ugh, profiles are still a mess, okay? That's not going to be solved until everyone adopts permission sets. That's the answer. Okay, so we need to be disciplined. We need to release changes quickly, and you don't want to leave them too long in the pipeline if you're going to be successful with DevOps Center. So let's see a brief video for this. If I can find my pointer. And I'll talk you through this. I'm going to speed it up just for time purposes. I hope it's not going to be too fast for you. So here I'm creating a work item. And that work item is a simple change to add a withdrawn status to a pick list on a timesheet object. So note this is not a user story. Adrian spoke about this earlier. These are probably more the actual changes you want to make. It's not going to be as a project manager, I want to track my team's time. Okay? So I've put good reason in. Always good to put documentation in. This information isn't going to get lost. And it's creating me a work item of status new. And when I click on that work item, I get a choice straight away. I can either follow the cloudy route and develop it in a sandbox or a Scratch org, or I can follow the developer way of doing things. So you could get to choose at this stage, effectively, who's implementing this and how are they implementing it. I've picked a Scratch org in this case, and hopefully, oh yeah, work items created. And we see here, here's a list of the source track changes in that sandbox or in that Scratch org. I'm going to click it now. I need to make that change. So I clicked on that link for the Scratch org. It opens a new tab. I'm now in my timesheet application that I actually want to change, a different org, the sandbox or Scratch org. So we saw there is no existing withdrawn status. There's no smoke and mirrors here. I recorded this morning on the stand. I'm going into the timesheet object. I'm going to add a new pick list value. Pretty simple change, just for time purposes. So I've made that change. So let's go back to DevOps Center. And where's my change? I have to go down. Come on. Pull changes. Terminology, I think, is not great. Pull changes from that scratch org. What has changed? Wait, 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 spin, wait. There it is. There's the change I just made. It knows the status field has changed. And now I select the metadata, or the multiple metadata that's tied to that action I just made. So this is really good. We're not having a config workbook. We're linking things to the items that are changing. We're providing decent comments, which go into our Git repo, which is fantastic. And I then commit that. So again, terminology, I think Salesforce could work on that and be less devy with the terms. But if you're a Git person, you understand what this is doing. It's taking that change, it's updating the feature branch with those changes, it's got the information tracked, push, commit, boom, boom, boom. And this is 1.25, but hey-ho. Right, that is done. It should move, and we can create a review. So review's an interesting one. When you're an admin, you can do like a peer review. You can do the review in GitHub, as we'll see in a second. So I've got a link here to the actual change in GitHub. I can go look at that pull request, which is what's actually happened in the background. And maybe that's the architect looking at this. And the architect can hit that button. That's a bit painful right now if you're an admin, because things can go wrong. DevOps Center will detect if you do that, but if you're just an admin, use the ready to promote toggle. I don't know why it's not a button. Again, user experience, not great planning. I hit that toggle. It's now going to push that change into my approved work items. So it's been approved. It can now be deployed to our next environment. And here I can select one or more changes that are work items I want to move together. They are separate metadata. You can still get clashes at this point. I select that. I choose promote work item. It's given me an option of what changes to select and which testing option to run. Okay? What unit tests do I want to run at stage? I can't see those unit tests, but if they fail, what we'll see in this integration column is an error, and I can look at the reason for that error. And it's great when it's something you can fix in Salesforce. It's not so great when you have to go off to Git and start messing around with the repo to sort out your conflicts. Most of the time, it's OK. So it's taking that item, it's merging the branches within GitHub, it's pushing the changes, deploying the changes across from Git into that environment. So we're being source controlled for this. Finalize promotion, cleaning up the branch, doesn't delete feature branches. That's one slight problem, I think. OK, it's now in my integration environment. Great. And that works quite nicely. Oh, it's playing again. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to take data from different systems. I wanted to take information from Jira or ADO, and I want to show that against work items. I want to use more than just DevOps Center. I want to use Capado or Floatum as well. I want to take static code analysis that I talked about earlier, whether it's PMD, Code Analyzer, Clayton. I want to see all that in DevOps Center because I want to know when to press that promote button. I want to know that we did our testing, and I can't see that. Equally, if you're using Provast testing or using Postman, JUnit, whatever you're using, manual testing, you want those results to be visible alongside those work items. Well, it's written by Salesforce. It must be easy. Yeah. OK. So we looked at three options at first. The first one was using GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions are incredibly powerful, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. This is what we actually did first. But I could also have used an Apex trigger. I could have made a call out to an endpoint to do the actions, a remote server, a Jenkins server or something. Or these days, I can now do that with a flow trigger. With Summer 23, external services, now supports Post. Have a look at those. They're very powerful. So we did number one, and it had problems. Those problems were, the first part is we did the CI/CD integration with GitHub. That was easy. It manages the process. It spins up a container for me. It has a virtual machine. I can test Mac OS even. And when an event fires with GitHub, that event could be a pull request or a commit, but it can also be a comment on a wiki or a status value changing on an associated piece of GitHub metadata or one of their Kanban boards. So it's incredibly powerful. But to script this, you need to learn YAML, yet another markup language. It isn't too difficult. There are courses on doing this with Salesforce DX. There's a massive manual from GitHub as well, and the sorts of things you could do. It's extremely powerful. It's a limited free tier, very good for R&D purposes. If you want to do what we've done, this is a good place to start. But it didn't meet our requirements, okay? The DevOps Center UI is locked. There's Lightning Web Components, there's no flexi pages. You cannot drop your components on the same page. You cannot take their components and drop it on your page. We can't change the workflow. I can't put a test button into that process, okay? I can't change the pick list values that they have. I can't change the names of things. But we can still access the object data. So I can get at all the data DevOps Center is storing because it's stored in the org. So to overcome these limitations, we decided to create an extension package. And Samuel, if you could just walk us through what you did there and how we overcame those challenges.
Yeah, sure. So to give a bit of recap and context, we created an app to manage quality throughout the whole pipeline. But as you know, quality doesn't happen in isolation. So all the testing happens as part of your software development lifecycle, and even that happens as part of your release management and using tools like Jira and others. Now, the issue we had, which Richard just mentioned, is how do we integrate with DevOps Center? The good thing is that because the application we built is on the Salesforce platform, anything that is native, in theory, should be easy to integrate with. So for us, it was, well, let's go for an integration with it. Again, a recap of the challenges. We have a closed UI, so that seems like a no-go. We didn't have a clue of how DevOps Center works behind the scenes. We only know what's happening in the UI, but we don't know what's happening behind it. And then there's the question, like, can we even use DevOps Center as a dependency for our package? So what we did is, well, let's go. I think it was still in the beta version when we decided to integrate with it. Obviously, there was a lot of hype around DevOps Center, and we wanted to see if we could embed quality into the pipeline. So the first thing we did was create an extension package. And initially, I built the package. Everything worked correctly in a dev org because it couldn't be pushed into a scratch org, I think, then. And then I realized I cannot package this because I cannot add it as a dependency. So I had to go through the whole pain of making every reference to anything that has to do with DevOps Center dynamic. So my code assumes that DevOps Center is there, but it doesn't reference anything. That was a pain in itself. And then there's the pain of every time you want to test DevOps Center, you need to set it up. And setting it up means connecting to each one of your orgs, setting up, the orgs have to actually have metadata and things in there. So every time you want to test your extension to DevOps Center, it can be a pain. But we did that. So actually, I wanted to go with you through the thought process of how we did it. So the first question is, how does it work behind the scenes? Because as we have a closed UI, there's no way I can modify that. What would be your suggestion on starting to figure out, let's say, the data model? How would you figure out the data model so that you have an understanding of the hierarchy and the different relationships? Schema builder, okay, that's one option. You can go to Object Manager. You can see that there's a namespace prefix. I did it in a different way. So, where's my?
We'd switch the mirror, don't we?
Yeah, let's see if I can make it easy for myself. There we go. Lovely. So I wanted to kill two birds with one stone. So on one hand, I want to understand the data model, but I also want to not just understand it from the abstract perspective, but with actual records of the things I'm working with. So I don't know why, but I thought, let's go to the project, which seems to be the top level, and everything else seems to be related to it. So a way of reverse engineering how it works is, well, let's go to the project. Let's go to page layout. And I think it doesn't have anything there because they haven't prepared DevOps Center to be exposed using layouts. But from here, I can start understanding what are the fields that they're using, and most importantly, the related lists. So I can start seeing, okay, these are the related lists I can start using. So what I started to do is bring the data model to the surface. How do I do that? Well, they're not using Lightning Experience, but I want to use it. So I created a custom app. I created custom tabs for project, work items. I created Lightning pages with dynamic forms. And whereas they have a closed UI, what I did was surface all the data model in a way that I could manage. So here is my app. And then finally, I have a more familiar way of looking at what's happening here. So we have a project. That project has a description. I have all my work items there. A project has environments and has pipelines. And then one by one, I can create my own page layouts and start building from scratch the application that they didn't create. Just so that I have a good understanding of what's happening behind the scenes. So once we saw that, it was time to understand, okay, at what point throughout the pipeline should we start embedding quality? So we thought, okay, let's break it down into two different levels. And we have a level 1 integration, which is just the basic thing of, well, we just want to have visibility of test cases in relation to work items. So I went to work item. We have all the information there. And what we thought is, okay, let's create a junction object between work item, a test case, or work item can have many different types of test cases. Our core package has the test cases. The extension package has the junction object. Once DevOps Center enabled people to use it as a dependency and to be used in Scratch orgs, I had to backtrack on all my dynamic Apex and queries and go back and it's like, okay, what are the API names? Remove all the work I did and finally use their actual data model. So I wanted to make it a bit more interactive than just a related list. So I actually created a Lightning Web component. So what you see there on test cases is a Lightning Web component. You see it has add, it has fancy columns and so on, because it's not just about seeing the test case, but I thought, well, our testing tool also thinks about environments, so let's link our environments to their environments, and let's talk in terms of DevOps Center. So for them, in their pipeline, we have a Scratch org, and from my Lightning Web component, I wanted to see what was the result of the last run for each one of those test cases from the work item. So suddenly we have DevOps Center, which helps me to create a work item and manage it through add metadata to it and manage it through the pipeline. And then we have a custom app that's in my extension package that helps me look at more information about it and look into the quality of my particular work item. And then we built this, and I realized actually we want to connect to Copado and Flossom, which are also native. So we repurposed this Lightning Web component. We made it part of the core package, and then the extension package just sends information about the particular data model of the DevOps tool so that it renders based on the tool that it's looking at. But anyway, the first level is just showing the test cases on the work item. The level 2 integration is actually triggering the test cases. And then the question is, when and how do we know how a work item is moving from one environment to another? When is it being promoted? When is it in review? So when we look at the pipeline, if you remember before, we have, when we're on a work item, you can go in review. That creates a pull request. If you have scripts in GitHub, they will run. But for us, we don't want to go that deep into developer territory. We want to be still here in the UI. So we thought, OK, we want to actually trigger our test cases when it goes into review. And if you look here, this work item, it says state in review, but that is actually a formula. So I went to the formula. What's the actual field it's looking at? It's looking at review remote reference. So that's actually an identifier for the pull request. So what we did is, OK, off the back of a number being entered there when there was none before, I want to trigger things in my core package to take care of the executions. So we create a flow. So we have a few flows here. We have one where we trigger the Apex unit tests, and another where we trigger Provar test cases. And then we have two different flavors of that flow. So if you look at the work item, as a tester, either you manually decide these are the test cases I want to be run on that work item, but you may not know all the test cases. You may know maybe you created one, and that's the one that you know. But another flavor would be, actually, I want you to run all the test cases that are related to the metadata that is being changed. So that's a much smarter way of doing it. So I don't have to tell you what test cases to run. I know my test cases. I know the metadata they cover. You go and figure out how to do it. So we have two flows in there. One is based on the actual manually selected test cases, and the other is based on the metadata that is implicit to be covered. So I'm just going to look at one of them. So off the back of a work item getting a new reference, a new number for a pull request, go and interact with my core package and trigger the execution. And we package this as part of the extension package as a template. So anyone can come here. This is like a pre-made quality pipeline by our customers, and users can go and just clone it and change it and make it as they wish. And then finally, we bring the results back and we show them in our core package. So what we did is not be afraid of DevOps Center being closed UI, not really understanding how it works, but instead reverse engineer it, bring things to the surface, and then see how can we integrate with it. So let me go back to a few closing remarks. First, if you are not familiar with DevOps Center, definitely go to, I think they have some courses on Trailhead.
That's on Trailhead, yeah.
They have videos, demos. Before you start customizing it and bringing your own custom things into it, sort of working around, see if they're actually planning to do those things as part of their roadmap. So for example, you say, oh, we use Jira. We want to relate those work items to our Jira user stories. Well, before you spend time doing that, maybe it's on the roadmap, which I believe it is, to see, well, actually they're going to do it in maybe a few months or whenever it is. So I might as well wait for it.
We wrote our own, though, because we couldn't wait. So did Elements.
Yeah, but the main point is not about quality or DevOps. It's more around don't be afraid to start using it, to get used to it, to see how it works, how it can help you, And where you feel maybe constrained by the closed UI, remember, it's built on the platform. So you're free to create your custom apps, your custom tabs, Lightning experience, dynamic forms, whatever you want, it's there. The data model is there. Just figure out where everything is. You can build flows, triggers, classes. So maybe in the future they will go back to Lightning experience. Maybe they won't, but that doesn't stop any of us from using the power of the platform.
There was a message earlier, Adrian was saying, they've been to Karen Pidlak, and they are reverting some of the UI decisions they made and making it more open. They've been talking with us about why did we extend it, and they've gone, yeah, that's a good idea. And now I think Lightning's using web components, which when they started this, were using Aura, they probably thought, this is rubbish, same as we did. So they went and did their own thing with real custom web components, and now they've probably gone, yeah, let's redo it now.
Yes. Some caveats. So obviously, DevOps Center is not a tool that you own, and they can make changes to the data model that will or may break customizations that you made, and this actually happened to us. We built the extension package, and then they released version 5.5, and they got rid of the projects tab, which obviously nobody knows is there until you realize it's part of the package. We were assuming it was there, and then realizing that our extension was broken because they removed things from their package. So that's one of the caveats when you build on somebody else's work. If they change it, then you may break your stuff. Having two apps is not ideal. Obviously, we wish everything could be on DevOps Center, but if you go down this route, then you will end up with two different apps for different use cases. So that's something you have to consider. And just a couple of ideas. So I already mentioned how you can use this approach to connect to your release management. If they're doing it with Jira, maybe you're using Azure DevOps or a different release management tool, and it's maybe far back in the roadmap, so maybe you don't want to wait. So either you use MuleSoft or you use point-to-point integration, and then suddenly you can say, hey, I'm doing things in Azure DevOps, but then I want to still leverage DevOps Center. And the other is, if you're an admin, you may be interested in doing reports on the metadata that is being changed. So maybe as an admin or a project manager, you want to have a report of all the metadata that is being changed as part of your next release. And instead of asking your developers, hey, did you give me the metadata you're changing? Oh, I forgot. I don't know at this point what test class is, what it is. So here you just do a report on the work items that you're promoting. You can see there's a junction or a related list of metadata. So you just pull a report and say, if it's internally or for your customers, like here's the list of all the metadata that is changing. Be aware of these new pick list values or whatever it is. So it can help you surface that level, that information in reports, dashboards. And remember, everything is in the platform. The data is in the platform. You just need to figure out the way they've built things and how you can leverage for your own purposes.
Okay. Questions? Don't be shy.
Yeah.
The data behind the objects, will it come towards the storage of Salesforce?
It does at the moment, and I know it's on here somewhere. Yeah, there is a story on here to make it not count towards the storage. Obviously, with our extension package, yes, that all counts. And what we've done on like a test results is you need an archiving process for anything like this where actually, do I care about all that detail and all that mapping? Where is it?
On researching, second one.
Oh, there it is. Investigate how to have DevOps Center count not against one. So we need to tell them. Yep, we're good. We need to tell them how to do that because we know how to do it, and clearly they don't. Aloha packages. Planning for what, sorry? Rollback option. Yes, that's in there as well, and boy, is it painful. Oops. Rollbacks are on there as well. I mean, the important thing is, there's the link for their GitHub, their Kanban. You can go onto there, you can report things. If you don't tell them what's wrong with it, they won't fix it. It's the classic thing, don't suffer in silence. So vote on rollbacks, tell them why it's important, get it prioritized, because for me, that's one of the biggest things it's missing. Yes, GitHub Enterprise is also needed. Yes, Bitbucket for different customers.
Yeah, considering right now.
Considering. So I don't think we'll see it for Dreamforce. Maybe we will. I don't know. Adrian.
When they took the tab away, was that in the move from beta to release? Like I'm trying to get
No, I think it
consider this to be an API that you're building on and they ought to respect it.
It was from 5.3, which is already GA, to 5.5, and suddenly I couldn't install my package because it's like, we're missing this project tab. It's like, what do you mean you're missing this? Obviously it's there. No, it wasn't anymore. Yeah.
And I used the developer release, and fair enough, I went in and I hacked their objects, I changed statuses, and it kind of worked. And then they shut that all down. I'm like, you've just ruined all my integration. They're like, yeah, but it's developer preview, yeah. But yeah, they've still done that in GA, and they will probably continue a few
They removed some fields. Obviously, for them, they believe that you don't know any of this because you're not meant to use it. So they're not expecting you to build and to depend on their fields. But hey, you can hack it around.
And with the dynamic stuff, remember, it's a package at the moment, so it has a namespace, but it will become core, like all the Salesforce apps are moving to core. So assumingly that namespace will disappear, and we'll have to do a bit of a global replace. But yeah, that's the cost of being an early adopter. Any more?
Anyone thinking of hacking it? And
Have we convinced you to do what we did? Are any of you now going to adopt DevOps Center and give it another go as an admin? 1, 2, 3, 4. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Anthony from DSelect. And what is DSelect as a platform? It is essentially a way to enable marketers that use the Salesforce Marketing Cloud to get more out of their data. DSelect serves both non-technical marketers, for instance those who do not know how to write SQL queries, as well as technical marketers who are very well versed in a platform but who are looking for ways to be more efficient or who just want to enable their less technical colleagues. DSelect is an official Salesforce Marketing Cloud partner that offers the leading marketing data enablement platform on AppExchange. Fortune 500 leaders and mid-sized businesses leverage DSelect's intuitive solutions to help marketing teams create more powerful segmented audiences, control marketing communication frequency, and achieve faster Marketing Cloud ROI without code or technical dependencies.